Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and this week we are focusing literally on the bricks and mortar of the construction sector's battle to boost productivity, embrace new methods of delivery, and hit its housing and infrastructure ambitions and targets. My guest today is Andrew Shepherd, Managing Director of Growth and Innovation at Ibstock Plc, the UK's largest manufacturer of clay bricks and a leading provider of concrete building products. Andrew has spent his career trying to rethink products and create a manufacturing revolution that genuinely transforms the way housing, infrastructure and buildings are designed and delivered, because for decades the UK construction industry has been locked in a struggle with stagnating productivity and a dwindling skilled labour force. While other global sectors have embraced a digital and manufacturing revolution, construction has largely remained site-based, manual and vulnerable to the whims of the weather and the inefficiencies of a fragmented supply chain. Yet, with a multi-billion pound pipeline of infrastructure slated, a government target of 1.5 million new homes and a non-negotiable mandate for net zero delivery, the industry can no longer afford the luxury of business as usual. So today we have to move away from building and towards industrialised manufacture. And if you heard my recent podcasts with the teams at the new hospital programme, the concept of industrialised construction and standardised designs, Hospital 2.0 in their case, is now understood to be central to securing the industry's future. But this kind of transition requires big thinking and a bold pivot towards modern methods of construction and design for manufacture and assembly, shifting from the muddy construction site to the precision of the factory floor. So Andrew's mission at Ibstock is clear. How can the fundamental building blocks of construction, the humble brick, be used to solve the UK's productivity and housing puzzle through true industrialisation? It's a big challenge, but one that Andrew is embracing with passion. So let's hear about it. Andrew, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Thanks, Anthony. It's a joy to be here and speak to you.
Well, let's crack on with the big picture, Andrew. I mean, the UK's construction productivity has remained stubbornly flat for decades. In your view, I mean, is the solution purely technological, or is it a cultural shift in how we perhaps value labour and how we organise ourselves?
Well, I'm going to start by exploring that productivity gap. So if you look at the data, and there's plenty of data, the ONS do it, the EU do it, McKinsey do it, there are lots of people looking at data when it comes to construction and other industries. If you look at productivity since 1919, so post First World War, agricultural productivity and output has increased many fold. If you think about what was happening in 1919, it was a very manual process, manual labour, and very little mechanisation. That has changed now to a world where you have combine harvesters, you have changed the way that wheat is grown, so it's smaller, so you get better output, huge amounts of mechanisation, huge amounts of investment, demand for food. If you look at construction productivity over that period of time, it is exactly the same or worse.
Right. So
there are many ways of measuring productivity, and there are many challenges the industry faces, but none of the measures show an increase in productivity since 1919, since post-World War II, since the last 30 years. So we have a big issue. The issue is cultural. That's clear. It is investment. That's clear. There's lots of different reasons why we have, in the construction industry, a real challenge. I don't think there is one silver bullet. I don't think there is one thing that is causing it. I think there are lots of different challenges that we need to address and tackle.
Well, we have got some things that are being put in place, Andrew. I mean, the government set out this 725 billion pipeline of projects, and I mentioned the housing targets. I mean, does that provide the security required for the industry, businesses like Ibstock, to invest or make those investments in long-term innovation?
So I broadly welcome the NISTA pipeline. I think it's a great thing. It's wonderful to have visibility on what might come down towards us. The key word there is might. I remember back in 2007, we had a Labour government talking about building schools for the future, 55 billion once-in-a-generation rebuild of all secondary schools in the UK. Contractors geared up, built factories, created work plans, built teams to start doing it, and some hugely successful first projects, some wonderful school buildings. I even remember, I think one won the Sterling Prize, an AHMM school for Bovis, which looked fantastic. And that was multiple iterations of good school design and great work that people were doing. Change of government, complete back to the drawing board. So it is to be welcomed that there is a pipeline and there is some visibility. From an Ibstock perspective, we invest our key deliverable is output of high quality products. So we've invested about £300 million in manufacturing over the last 7 years in the UK. That's a massive contribution. That's putting our money where our mouth is. And what we need to see is that demand flow through to justify those investments and future investments. We need to see engagement from customers, and we need to see growth in core markets.
Yeah. But do you think, I mean, I mentioned the 1.5 million homes target, which, I mean, yeah, I get your a certain amount of cynicism as to whether they actually stack up. And there's a lot of people who don't think that that's a deliverable target. But does having a target like that help to drive change into the sector?
Well, targets in the right place do help. So, for example, when a local authority has a target to build a number of houses or create a pipeline of plot identification as part of its local plan, for me, that's a positive thing. It's forcing them to think and it's forcing them to act. A target of 1.5 million with nobody responsible for delivering it is never going to be achievable. The government is setting out its stall, but one thing government doesn't do is build houses. Government hasn't built houses since 1980s. So the one lever that they could pull to make that happen, or the biggest lever they could pull, isn't there. We've still got planning challenges. We've still got cost challenges. We've still got regulatory challenges. So there's things that are actually at odds with the statement of we want to build 1.5 million homes. I think quietly that's disappearing, that 1.5 million. I certainly haven't seen it mentioned by anyone from government in the last few months. So I don't see that still is a key target, but the target and the aspiration is good.
Yeah, well, Mike Reed, MP, when I spoke to him recently, he said he thought he was going to be the last person still hanging on to that target. So maybe he's the last one. I don't know. Anyway, meanwhile, of course, we're also being pressed to cut carbon and boost sustainability. I mean, how do we balance the sustainable delivery that I know that you're passionate about with the harsh reality of rising material costs and tight developer margins?
So for me, sustainability is a really interesting challenge. It's an area that's a great opportunity, but it's also an area that's probably poorly understood and quite often, for my money, is quite often oversimplified. So Ibstock has a factory in Swanage in Dorset where we hand make bricks, and it's our highest carbon product we make. It's a very high carbon product, and it's a bit of a challenge as to should we be doing that. But by having that factory, we're able to secure and refurbish existing assets. We're able to make the bricks that we use to refurbish Westminster Abbey or Eton College, buildings that are 600, 1,000 years old. And without that skill, how would you refurbish them? You would actually create worse carbon by potentially, and not in those examples, obviously, but you'd end up having to demolish buildings, which creates even more carbon. So you've got to understand the purpose. For me, the lowest carbon building is the building that's already built, that's already there, that we use. So when we do new infrastructure, it's got to be better. It's got to be delivering something more. And that's really important. We've got to be thinking about the buildings we build lasting for 200, 300 years, not buildings that are going to be there for 60 years. I think we have to look much longer term.
Yeah.
And actually, we need to decide right at the outset if the right thing is to demolish an existing asset or to refurbish it, because, again, that's part of that carbon calculator. So if the government's starting to think about Part Z, which has been mooted many a time about looking at embodied carbon of buildings, for me, it's really important that Part Z captures the existing carbon of a building that's already there, not the demolishing the building at the end of 60 years life carbon. That's completely the wrong equation for me. If we're building something, it shouldn't be for 60 years, it should be 200. But if we're building something and demolishing something, that has to be part of that carbon calculation.
Yeah. I mean, your passion comes across and your knowledge about this whole area comes across in spades, to be quite honest. Let's talk a bit about you for context on that. You started KPMG before moving towards construction with Curry and Brown. I mean, how has your background in finance shaped your approach to the physical and often messy world of contracting and manufacturing?
Well, I did do a quantity surveying degree first, and then decided the bright lights of the city would appeal. And working for KPMG was a great foundation. I spent 3 years there getting chartered and understanding numbers. And I was working in what was then their infrastructure and government team. So I was looking at new build projects and advising sponsors of PFI projects or investments into real estate. And actually what helps is really understanding why investors invest and what drives them. And that's always stuck with me. That foundation and that knowledge is actually not something the construction industry is particularly good at. We don't understand how our customers measure their returns on the things that we're building. Yeah. So that really helps in terms of justifying the decisions we make for me. So understanding, well, are they looking for a real estate return that's driven by rents, or have they got a hard date, or whatever it might be. So that helps. I then moved from that side into working as a technical advisor for Curry & Brown, advising exactly the same clients, but on a commercial basis rather than just on a financial basis. And that for me was where I felt very comfortable, offering that broad spectrum of advice on commercial aspects and decisions and assumptions they were making against long-term 50 years, 25 years, whatever their particular horizon was, thinking. So it was just bringing together both the financial knowledge and some of that engineering construction knowledge I gained.
No, and you gradually edge closer and closer towards the muddy end of the business, maybe. But and you said that you have a passion for the sustainable delivery of new infrastructure. I mean, what's your current role at Ibstock, though, and how does that help you meet that kind of personal objective?
So my current role here is the leading on the innovation and growth within the business. So that's a wide variety of different areas. It's new products. So Ibstock is really committed to reducing our carbon footprint. And some of that is about developing new lower carbon products. It's about thinking and understanding how we can manufacture in a more effective and efficient way that, again, can reduce carbon. It's also starting to think about the new products that aren't in existence today that can increase productivity on site, reduce carbon throughout the supply chain process, and actually deliver better outcomes. And growing our business in those new areas and those new sectors that we're not exploring today. So an example of that is starting to think about what are the real life challenges we've got on site. So when we're not going to say the boots have ever got too muddy, but when the boots have got a little bit muddy, Anthony, the problems that I've seen on site, the real life challenges that operatives, people really at the coalface have seen, how can we make that better and help them to achieve more? So my mind is sort of thinking about two different areas. One, where we see the challenges over there, but secondly, what are the solutions that we as Ibstock can create and deliver to address those?
Yeah. Well, you say you never got too muddy, but you did work for Lang O'Rourke for a time, and you mentioned the foray into off-site manufacture that certainly the companies like Lang O'Rourke drove and championed. You then founded the Mid Group, but then that had the ambition to really drive the adoption of off-site solutions. I mean, how did that whole process go? That whole those early days of trying to really embrace off-site solutions.
So I was very fortunate to go into Lang O'Rourke at a point in time where they're just opening their new Explore manufacturing park in Worksop. And one of my first jobs was to look at how we could use that on particular projects. And this was particularly thinking about the schools and the education sector. And one of the first large jobs that came out of that was a school project we delivered, Dagenham Park Church of England School, which was, I think, the first big project from that factory. And it was a huge success. We worked with big architects, AHMM, who were great architects. And Paul Bonaherne, one of the partners at AHMM, absolutely embraced it, took the time to understand the manufacturing process and the outcomes, and delivered a really world-class school. It's one of those projects you still think about today and still looks fantastic. And delivered a great outcome and really embraced it. And then I was lucky enough to then deliver some other projects that were using similar techniques and same mindset, same process. And one of the challenges for me was that within an organisation like Lang O'Rourke, you're trying to persuade 15,000 people to think differently. And that's difficult. Change management is hugely, hugely difficult. We all know that. So actually, how do we do more? How do we advance that more quickly? Because I'm a believer, as you well know, Anthony. So For me, it was, I had an opportunity to go and start a business with some overseas investors that wanted to do things a bit differently, wanted to invest in UK construction. So we set the business up with the ambition to just start with, this is the only way we're going to do things. There isn't an alternative. So you come if you believe and don't come if you don't. It was simple. And actually, there were challenges. There was a huge amount of naivety from my perspective. I was naive enough to assume that, I got in the room because I knew what I was talking about. And actually, you got in the room because you worked for an amazing company like Laing O'Rourke.
Yeah.
So you had to knock on that door 3 or 4 times to get in rather than just once. So there were things that you learn, and you learn a huge amount when you start a business. You have to learn about insurance and HR and payroll and all those sorts of things, which is phenomenally helpful in terms of your own learning and abilities. But what we quickly boiled down was there are better ways of doing things, and people wanted to challenge, and it was in lots of different places and lots of different areas. And through allowing people the space to challenge, I think that was one of the key things, is we allowed people the opportunity to challenge, to come forward with ideas and to come forward with fresh thinking in a space where it was okay to fail fast.
Yeah.
It wasn't okay to fail slow. If you're going to fail fast, and then we'll challenge and we'll understand why we failed, and then we'll try and make it better. So we had that attitude, and we had a great team of people that came on and wanted to do that. And it was then when Goldman Sachs and Top Hat came knocking that we want to do this on scale with real investment and real commitment to it, that you saw actually people are listening, people really do believe in this.
Yeah, so that was the evolution. The Top Hat was the evolution of your work at Mid Group.
Yeah, so I sort of got to the point in 2020 where the shareholders wanted to take the Mid Group into a different direction, and it was, the majority was their business, so that was their prerogative. And I'd been having conversations with Goldman's and Top Hat about potentially going in there as a managing director to grow the business to help their ambitions. And it was really interesting because it was something I had looked at in my Laing O'Rourke days was modular. We'd done a lot of work with some of the big investment houses. We built some trial apartments and houses up at the factory in Worksop. And we'd really done a lot of work into that. And then the market was difficult, and it just got stuck, and these things do. Yeah. And there's sometimes there's a right time and not a right time, and it wasn't the right time to proceed with that.
Now, would you say that major developers, housing associations, institutional investors, are they now more readily embracing this transformation of the sector perhaps than they were back then? Yeah,
I think it's a challenge. It's a challenge. And the reason it's a challenge is because no one makes the decision in construction. No one person makes the decision in construction. That's a real challenge for us. There are very few cases where there is a single decision maker. If you think about your average big house development scheme, your decision makers will be the planners, your decision makers will be the insurance company, will be the bank, will be the funder's technical advisor, will be all of these different people will have an influence on the decision. So making decisions, and HBC will make a decision, and so your ability to make a decision is very constrained. So doing something that is out of the ordinary and isn't the same as the last time is incredibly hard, and you need to find a scenario where you have single people or 2 people that are making a decision, bring it all together in one place.
You're now at Ibstock, of course, as I say, largest manufacturer of clay bricks and concrete building products. What can a manufacturer like Ibstock really do to drive that transformation? Given what you said about the fact that it's hard to find those single decision makers, are you able to influence those decisions?
Yeah. So for me, one of the things I've learned over a number of years is actually the products flow uphill. So the majority of the investment day to day in the construction industry is actually in the manufacturing. If you think about some of the big manufacturing companies that are involved in construction, they're huge organizations with massive balance sheets, massive investments in manufacturing, making the products they think that the market wants.
Yeah.
The challenge you've got is there's quite a gap then between the manufacturers and the main contractors, because you might have distributors, you might have subcontractors, and so on till you get to the main contractor itself, or even the client. So you have a very long nose to tell in that industry. The thing we can do is we can invest into the new products and the factories that deliver the products the market requires. We can support contractors in some of their challenges, be it productivity, be it cost, be it carbon, whatever it might be, if we understand what the problems are.
Yeah.
So we're taking the time to speak to the contractors and to their subcontractors to understand some of those challenges, some of those problems. By understanding those, we can then work out where to invest to really deliver some bang for the buck. Because it's through manufacturing, we will deliver it. We've called it design for manufacture and assembly in the past. We've called it industrialized construction. We've called it various different things. But at the heart of it is manufacturing things that can be assembled very quickly on site. And we need to bring those two together because they're so far apart today.
Yeah. Well, when you joined the business in 2024, it was to run the Ibstock Futures business, and that is all about bringing that industrialization to the supply chain. Is that the vehicle that really Ibstock uses to get that message across?
It is a vehicle that we've used, and it was set up specifically for that purpose, to say, right, we want to go and do something that challenges our own understanding, that enables us to support our customers and our customers' customers. It's somewhere where we can go and explore and try new ideals and invest into new manufacturing facilities that do new things. So, alongside that, we've had a program of investment. We've opened brand new factories that do new things, created new products, create new products that don't even exist until we started making them. So that's quite an exciting place to be.
I mean, is the language now really construction thinking about assembly rather than about building? I mean, is that kind of the sort of language you're using?
I think we've got to think of it in lots of different ways. And I think language is part of the problem sometimes, because we've had offsite, we've had MMC, DFMA, industrialised construction. People sometimes hang too much on a phraseology or a term or something like that. For me, we've got to create the products that customers need and want. So there's no point in creating something that no one needs. We still think there's a huge market out there for our clay bricks. They're a great product.
Yeah.
They last hundreds of years, if not thousands of years, and they can be used and should be used, in the right way. But there are times that will not necessarily be the right product, and we should have the alternative product to support those customers too. So understanding that is hugely important. And whether or not it's industrialized construction, manufacture and assemble, it's still building good outcomes for people that are going to live in it. So be it a school, a hospital, major social infrastructure or civil infrastructure, we need to build it as best we can, as quickly as we can and as efficiently as we can.
I mean, based upon what you said about the work you did with Laing O'Rourke and working very closely with the architect, I mean, how early do you need to be in the room with architects to actually ensure that DFMA is embraced as a fundamental rather than an afterthought?
Before they're even thinking about the project.
Oh, right.
So one of the things we've done over the last 12 to 18 months is our design advisors, our in-house team, have been doing a lot more CPD sessions with architects. For me, there's no sort of greater benefit for them to understand the things we can do, but also to hear the challenges. So we want to hear what the problems are, as well as us telling them these are the things we can do. We also need to hear these are our day-to-day challenges so that we know where the real-life problems are. So we're trying to bring that closer. So working with architects, working with design teams and contractors, working with subcontractors, doing a lot more CPD sessions, just to challenge our own assumptions and thinking.
I mean, talking about the house building challenge specifically, I mean, is that target, or does that target become more achievable if the government was to, say, introduce some mandatory MMC first policies for social housing?
I don't think so. They've tried it in the past. There is a presumption in favour of offsite. There's all sorts of things already there.
Yeah.
But if you've got social housing providers that don't have enough cash to invest, or their investment targets are focused elsewhere because they've got existing stock problems, or they've got fire stopping issues, or they've got other issues, they're going to be spending their time focused over there. I do believe they delivered about 50,000 social homes last year, which I think is the highest number in many, many, many years, which is good. And that's a great step forward. So we need to continue seeing that growth in delivery through that side of things. We're seeing new entrants into housing. So you've got affordable housing through build to rent. So you're seeing more build to rent investment. That's another good thing. Investors coming into UK housing. And then you've got for-profit housing associations, which again is only about 1% to 2% of the market, and I suspect will always be a smaller participant, but again can bring some real value, some real discipline to the market too.
I mean, presumably also moving towards a factory environment, such as your new Nostell brick factory in West Yorkshire. Does that help to specifically address perhaps historical quality gaps that the UK housing sector has been plagued with?
Yeah, and I think that there's been lots of new regulations. So the Building Safety Act has brought lots of regulation. We've got construction product regulation likely to come out this year. The white paper is being published. So we will have construction product regulation, and that will have an impact. That is a good thing. I genuinely think that's a really positive thing. It will focus on good quality manufacturing processes. It will hold people's feet to the flames in terms of saying, right, if you've said it's purpose for this, then it has to be fit for purpose for that as well. So it will force manufacturers, it will force contractors to really think about how they're using things. And I think by default, it will bring the two parties closer together, because the contractor will have responsibilities, the manufacturer will have responsibilities. And if there isn't direct engagement between the two, then you may not necessarily get the outcomes you want, and that's a huge risk for those involved. So that forces that chain closer together, which is positive.
Yeah. Well, let's explore a bit more about your new Nostell factory, which I think you opened, is it the start of this year?
Yes, that's right. So just relatively recently opened.
Yeah. You say it's going to change how we think about facades. It's manufacturing brick slips, and you're assembling those into facades, which I presume you then deliver on site for buildings. In which specific ways do you think a building in 2027, say, will look or perform differently because of this facility?
So we don't call them brick slips when we make them purposely.
Oh, right, okay.
In our opinion, a brick slip is a brick cut, thin brick cut from a brick. So we call a brick slip a cut brick. We call these eye bricks to distinguish between the two. That's really quite important, because a cut brick obviously has more carbon than a brick, because you are processing it, so it's a higher carbon product. Whereas an eye brick, a purpose-made thin brick, it has significant benefits. So when we start to look at our Nostell factory, a typical brick factory between quarry, so clay coming out the quarry and bricks going onto the lorry, is 7 to 10 days. We're now down to 7 hours. So huge amount of time taken out of that process. And obviously time is money, time is carbon as well. So much less time in the kiln, fired for a lot less time. So there's big...
That's simply because they're smaller.
Simply because there's less mass. So you're creating a purpose-made thin brick. Because we're doing it as a purpose-made, it's also higher tolerance and should be much better quality and easier to use in the system. So that's great. It also has a lot more flexibility, this factory, than any other factory in our fleet. So we can create thousands of different bricks out of one factory. So most of our factories would maybe make 20 to 30 different brick types. This can make thousands. And everything from traditional Leicester red bricks through to glazed bricks that have different details on them and so on. So it creates that capability, and it doesn't need to be brick sized. It creates that opportunity again about different sizes and shapes. So that's quite exciting. But then how we use that is the next step. So the product in of itself is not much use until it's then used in a building in a particular way. So we've created a range of products and we work with the market. So we're working with a number of different manufacturers and facade companies to create solutions for their products. So we're taking cost out of the process. We are giving them better quality, higher range of projects that are lower carbon, lower cost, fantastic, that they can then go and use in their systems. We've developed new systems that allow us to put that into buildings, to respond to problems. So an example of that is the fast wall product we've developed, which is a panelised brick. Very lightweight, easy to use, easy to install, works brilliantly. It addresses a problem some of our house builder customers have identified. They're considering a move, and some of them have moved to adoption of timber frame to help them address future home standard. And this helps them to keep the wall thicknesses at a similar depth when they've moved to that timber frame, which actually gets slightly wider than the traditional brick and block.
I'm quite intrigued, though. All these innovations that you're coming up with, are they driven by you towards the market, or does the market come to you with ideas of the way that it actually wants to start delivering construction?
Well, sometimes it's a bit of both. So we sometimes see a problem and come up with a solution, and sometimes a customer comes to us and says, I want something. So an example where it's the market asking for something is we create troughs for network rail for utility ducts. And they used to be about 35, 40 kilos each. So you needed two people to lift them, or you needed some kind of craneage to lift them. And someone said, can we make it 25 kilos to bring it within manual handling? So we looked at lightweight concrete, we looked at different structure, we looked at many different ways of manufacturing it. But we came up with a sub 25 kilogram trough for cable trays, which was quicker, lighter, easier to install. And that was demand rather than push. So that was pulling us to create something better. So it happens both ways. And if you're not talking to the end user, you do not know that's needed.
No. That said, I was quite shocked recently in a conversation with a housing developer who was telling me about the fact that they imported their brick facades from China. And that did strike me as being somewhat backward looking in terms of its sustainable delivery.
Well, you've got to sit here and think the UK imported, I believe, about 300 million bricks from overseas last year. And they come from India, China, Pakistan. And some of those are countries that have benefited from very cheap Russian gas over the last few years. Yeah. So they have benefited from very low input costs. Probably not as regulated as UK in terms of emissions and so on. So there's a very different bar that a UK brick, for example, is set to than maybe an Asian brick might be set at. So it is different. This is why one of the reasons why we think construction product regulation is going to help, because it will put everything on the same level. Yeah.
Well, let's look forward just to close out, Andrew. I mean, you've championed this relentless focus on simplification. Where for you then is the most unnecessary complexity currently sitting in our UK construction process?
For me, and it's something I spotted many years ago, is our want to try and explain construction cost in a very simple way, and it is a lot more complex than maybe we think. And a great example of this was looking at schools many years ago. And it was cheaper for us to make schools with a 2.4 metre wide corridor, because the hollow core came in 1.2 metre wide segments. Right. So two pieces of hollow core, two installs, very simple, very quick. And a quantity surveyor from somewhere was sat there saying, but it must be cheaper to do 2 metre corridors because it's less materials. I was like, well, we'd buy the same thing and then process it and cut it and. So it would actually be more expensive. And there's such a simplification that in maybe how we think about construction costing that causes those types of problems. And it's prevalent in many, many different areas where we don't understand the manufacturing side of the construction process. So for me, we must take the time. We all need to understand how we manufacture those products. People know if you want special bricks, they cost a lot more than a standard brick. So people try and work with standard bricks, and house builders are phenomenally good at doing such a thing. But we still, within the main construction industry, main contracting industry, everything is designed from scratch. And actually that's such a waste of energy and process and design and time and cost and all those things.
Which, of course, is what projects like the Hospital 2.0, the new hospital program, are trying to change, getting away from having 3,000 doors and having just a range of half a dozen, whatever. Whether they're going to succeed in that, it will unfold in front of us. I mean, but beyond just setting targets, I suppose, is there one policy lever that the government could pull tomorrow to unlock the growth for manufacturers like Ibstock?
I don't think there's a magic bullet. There isn't. It doesn't exist. I have a sneaky suspicion if it did, Rachel Reeves might have pulled that particular lever already. They've asked the question enough times themselves, so it's a question they get asked. What's the one thing? And the one thing is this list. So there's a long list of things. There's no simple answer.
But no question. Off-site construction, modern methods of construction, design for manufacturing and assembly, call it whatever, industrialisation, it's going to be part of the future in the next decade. And I suppose if we get it right, what for you does UK construction look like in 10 years? How many bricks will be laid by hand versus installed as components?
So from my perspective, we've got an ambition to take housing as an easy one. We've got an ambition to build 300,000 houses a year as the UK. That won't be 3 billion bricks, give or take, hand laid. There just aren't enough people to do that. The UK brick market at the moment is about 1.92 billion bricks, and it might get up to 2.2, 2.3 billion bricks. And above that, it needs to be something else. So the something else is the bit we're thinking about now with things like fast wall and other systems. So it's that additionality that needs the something else. I want that additionality. I want there to be more homes being built. We need more homes. We've had significantly higher population growth than new homes formed. So that's a concern. We need to address some of the gaps in sustainability and productivity. So just adopting just some of the simple, better processes.
Yeah, and if we think hard enough about it, maybe the majority of that will also be made in the UK.
Well, construction products regulation won't force things to be made in the UK, but what it might do is make a level playing field for materials made in the UK and made elsewhere. And that's what we can ask for.
Yeah. Well, Andrew, I've got a feeling that you are going to be driving forward to make sure that as many of those things come true. So, and to say, we're discussing the need for a change and industrialisation in the sector. We've been having this discussion for so long now, it seems. But it's hard, and it does take huge effort and investment by businesses like Ibstock. So thanks so much for joining me on the Infrastructure Podcast today to update us where you are as a business and what you see the change looks like.
Thanks, Anthony.
Great stuff, but sadly that's all we've got time for on the podcast right now, but there is more in the pipeline as we continue to probe the big issues facing this sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the Infrastructure Podcast website, www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you'll find background information and all the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. So thanks for joining us. Thanks again to Andrew. I'll put some links to some of his products at Ibstock on the show notes, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon.